The pursuit of happiness is considered to be an inalienable right which has been endowed to each one of us by our Creator, according to the Declaration of Independence. The pursuit of happiness. And most of us, I would say maybe all of us, are doing everything that we can in our life to pursue happiness. We are pursuing happiness, but not everybody is happy. The world that we live in is always telling us this message, which is, if you buy this, then you'll be happy. I mean, that is kind of like the basic message of every commercial, isn't it? I mean, pretty much. If you buy this product, then you'll be happy. And we might use a lot of other words to say it, but basically that's the message. And that message is going to be cranking up big time. It probably already is, but it's going to be cranking up in commercials and in advertising on the radio. It's cranking up in some of our children. If you'll buy me this, I'll be happy. So buy me this so I can be happy. And our children will be saying that to us. But is it really true? Does it really work? A few years ago, I decided that I wanted to get into kayaking, and so I bought this kayak from this guy that sells kayaks. And so I went to his shop, and he didn't have the kayak that I wanted, but he said, "I have one in my warehouse." And so we went to his warehouse, and his warehouse was his own personal warehouse. I wasn't really aware of that. I thought it was like the kayak store's warehouse, but it was his personal warehouse. And when he opened the doors of his warehouse, I could not believe my eyes, because from the front of the place to the back of the place, from the floor to the ceiling, it was just crammed full of stuff. And there were bicycles. He had a collection of old Schwinn Stingrays. Remember those bikes? Some of you are old enough to remember those bikes. Those of you who are not old enough, you missed out on the 70s. But Stingray was a cool bike, and he had hundreds of these. Like everywhere he went that he found one for sale, he bought it. He had toolboxes, those large ones, the kind that you would only see in a mechanic shop, the tall ones on wheels. He had like dozens of them. He had truck boxes, that you put in the back of a truck. He had stereo equipment. He had guitars. He had records. He had just all kinds of stuff. And then he had a couple of kayaks. But I could not believe how much stuff he had. And I was like, "Where did you get all of this?" And he said, "Well, I just started buying things when I was young. And, if I saw something I wanted, I would just buy it." And so it turned out that he had like 2 more warehouses just like that. I mean, this guy had mountains of stuff, mountains and mountains of it. But the thing was, he was one of the most unhappy people I've ever met. So this "buy this will make you happy" idea, I'm not sure it works. But it is something that we get kind of sucked into. And it's not just for stuff. Sometimes we get sucked into, have this experience and you'll be happy. And so it's go on this vacation and you'll be happy. Do this cool thing, you'll be happy. Go to this concert and you'll be happy. And what happens is I think that people get into kind of a cycle where we start dreaming about the thing that we want and we finally get it. Or we work hard and we finally get the thing that we want. And we get it, and then it just doesn't seem to really make us happy. And so we fall into dissatisfaction. But then we start dreaming about something else that we want, and we work hard, and we dream, and we scheme, and we scrape together the money we need, and when we get it, and then it just doesn't, it's fun, it makes us feel good for a little while, and we're a little bit happy, but then we slide back down into disappointment. And so this could happen on a person's bucket list, like I'm going to skydive, and you skydive, and well, it didn't actually make me happy. So I'm going to go to Europe, and, it doesn't quite make me happy. This could happen with your house. Like, I love my house, but I just need that one piece of, that one little table right next to that wall. Kind of, it's like a half table. It goes around like that, and it's flat on one side. It has no purpose whatsoever, but it looks nice up against a wall. I'm going to get that, and then I'll be happy. My house will be complete. But then we get it, and then we're like, yeah, but I'm not completely satisfied with my house. I think I'm going to need to get a new couch, because the couch that I have just doesn't match that little table anymore. And so, so you get into this cycle where you acquire and you're dissatisfied. You acquire and you're dissatisfied. Am I speaking the truth? Oh, the finger is shaking from my wife. Okay, must have hit a chord. Okay, anyway, struck a nerve. Oh, that's gonna stink later. Anyway, what was I talking? Yes, okay. Dang it, you. But we don't really get happy. I mean, this cycle doesn't really make us happy. And the thing of it is that we were actually created to be happy. Happiness was supposed to be part of our life. Happiness was part of what we were designed for, what we were made to experience in life. And in a sermon that Jesus gives in Matthew chapter 5, he gives this sermon on a mountainside, and so we call it the Sermon on the Mount. He begins this sermon, Makarios, Artha, and he goes into a litany of Makarios, Artha, Makarios, Artha. This word Makarios is a Greek word, but it can be translated, it's often translated as blessed, but it can also be translated as happy. And he says, happy are this person, happy is that person, happy. And then he continues on throughout this whole sermon, I think, to give an exposition of what the happy life looks like, what the Makarios life looks like. And it doesn't look like that cycle of buy this and you'll be happy, experience this and you'll be happy. Interestingly, the very first line of this sermon is, Makarios are the poor, the people who don't have all of the stuff. Makarios are not the people who have warehouses full of stuff. Makarios are the people who don't have enough. That's how he starts this sermon. But he continues on, Makarios are happy are the poor, and then happy are those who mourn, happy are the humble, happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Happy are those whose hearts are pure. And he goes in and he starts talking about how we should control our anger, how we should be faithful in our marriage, how we should let our yes be a yes and our no be a no, how we should be people whose speech and action are consistent. Happy, that part of happiness is about not deciding not to take revenge. It's about having love for our enemies instead of hate for our enemies. And then he comes to this place in the sermon that Emily read from, where he says, don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be also. He's saying he knows that we store treasures. He knows that we have this kind of cycle. This is not something that was invented by Americans. This is a part of being a human being, that cycle of acquisition, dissatisfaction, acquisition. That's what drove the Europeans to colonize America in the beginning. That's what has driven so many wars. I mean, behind every war, there's probably a desire to have more, a desire to have more power, a desire to have more stuff. And so he knows that's part of our life, but he says, he doesn't say, don't store up treasures. He just says, store up treasures here rather than there. What he's showing us is that when we store up treasures here, where moths and rust destroy it, and where thieves can break in and steal, we are basically investing ourselves in something that can't last. But if we will store up treasures over here, where moths cannot destroy and where rust cannot destroy and where thieves cannot break in and steal, then we are storing our treasures and we're investing our treasures in things that can last, that are actually eternal. It matters to God how we use our money. It matters to God what we do with the money that we have. And what God has in mind for us is for us to be investing in things that are eternal. He wants us to be buying into God-sized dreams. He wants us to be buying into God-sized realities, God purposes, not our own purposes. The world is always encouraging us when we watch commercials and we're being sucked into this whole mindset. The world is encouraging us to invest in stuff that won't last, whereas Jesus is saying, invest in something that will last. The world is saying, invest in your own little kingdom, the kingdom of John, the kingdom of Emily, the kingdom of Amy, the kingdom of, each one of us. We all have our own little kingdoms. The world is telling us, invest in your own little kingdom. But Jesus is saying, invest in the kingdom of God. The world says, invest in your dreams. Jesus says, invest in God-sized dreams. And when we invest in God-sized dreams, that loop no longer controls us. And Makarios can become a reality. There is a sermon that was preached by a man named John Wesley. John Wesley was the person who started Methodism. John Wesley had an amazing attitude towards money. I mean, he preached it, but he lived it too. There was a time when John Wesley was approached by somebody. They came up to him and they said, "Mr. Wesley, your house is on fire. It's burning down." Apparently, his house caught on fire. And he said, "Well, it's actually not my house. It's the Lord's house. And I guess this means that I just have one less thing to manage for God. So it's my gain." I mean, he didn't care about his stuff. By today's standards, his income was about $1 million a year. When you convert the money of his day to today's money, he was making about $1 million a year. And yet he died with only enough money in his bank account to cover the costs of his funeral. He was so generous. He invested his money not in the treasures on earth, but he put it in treasures in heaven. He put it in the things that fulfilled God's purposes in the world. And so he taught people that there's a way to do this. There is an actual way that you and I can move our treasure from earthly things to heavenly things. And he said there's the first part of it is that you want to make as much money as you possibly can. There is no shame in striving to make as much money as you can. If that means that you go back to school and you get a little bit more education so you can get that promotion, then John Wesley said, go back to school and get that so you can make that leap up. We've got to make as much money as we can. And as long as it doesn't include any kind of immoral action. So as long as you're not doing anything to gain money that would be harmful or hurtful to somebody else. But as long as it's not, then by all means, go for it. Go for that promotion. Get that higher paying job. So that's the first part. He would say, earn all you can. But the second part is lower your expenses as much as you can. So as you're making more money, you're also going to be decreasing your expenses as much as you can. And so he said, you got to be careful about how you spend your money. If you're looking at two things that you're considering buying, and this one has all of the bells and whistles, but this one will get the job done, and it costs less, then buy the thing that costs less if it can get the job done. Don't buy the thing that has all of the bells and whistles. There's this thing that I think that you and I are kind of sucked into a lot, which I would call the 2.0 syndrome. And the 2.0 syndrome, and I'm speaking to myself here because I have fallen into the 2.0 syndrome, which is that if I have 1.0 and 2.0 comes out, then I need to get 2.0 because I don't want to be left behind. And so I bought the first iPhone that came out. They didn't even call it iPhone 1 because it was just iPhone. So I bought the iPhone, and then they came out with the iPhone 2, and then they came out with iPhone 3, and then 4 and 5, and now they're on to 6, which is actually like a small iPad. But anyway, I have bought all of them except for number 6. I've gotten sucked into that whole 2.0 syndrome of, and the crazy thing is that the phone that I had before I got the iPhone, when the iPhone came out, it was going to change my life forever. But it actually only got to change my life for about a year. And, so there's this whole thing, then it kind of sucks us in. And then the telephone companies are really smart because they say you can get a free upgrade. But what they do is they actually include the price of that phone into your monthly bill. They just kind of slide it in there. And so you're actually always paying for it. So I don't know if anybody works for one of those companies, but sorry. So if you work for one of those companies, I hope you're successful. Anyway, but the other thing that we do with our expenses is sometimes we do things like not all of us, I've never done it because I've never had the money to, but if I had the money to, I probably would. If I'm flying somewhere and if I could afford to fly first class, I would want to fly first class, But so if you are a person who has the ability to fly first class, John Wesley would say, don't fly first class, fly coach, because that way you can reduce your expenses. So the first part is earn all you can. You want to increase your income. But the second part is you want to decrease your expenses, which he called save all you can. And by save all you can, he didn't mean develop the largest savings account you can. He meant lower your expenses. So that you can do the third step, and the third step is give all you can. When you have a high income and low expenses, you've just increased your ability to give, and the ability to give is the thing that you're going for. And when you can give, now the more you give, the more you can invest in the things of God, the more you can invest in the purposes of God, and when you do that, your heart follows it. And so if you want to be a person who is generous and a person who is experiencing true happiness, Makarios, the way to do it is not to just pray and hope that your heart will feel strangely warmed to become generous. No. What Jesus is saying here is where your treasure is, your heart will be also. So move your treasure from the earthly stuff to the heavenly stuff, and your heart will follow. And it's so, so true. I've noticed that because this past week I bought a truck, and this sermon was handwritten for me. But anyway, I bought this truck, and before I bought the truck, I was dreaming and scheming about the truck, and I was looking over reviews, and I was examining all of the features, and I was spending a lot of time reading and researching and looking at this truck. That truck, even before I got it, had my heart. Because that's where my treasure was. And so where we place our treasure, that's where our heart goes. What Jesus is telling us is that if we want Makarios, if we want true happiness, then we need to move our treasure into the things of God. My wife and I got to go to South Africa this past month. And South Africa is a beautiful country, incredibly beautiful. The landscape is beautiful, the people are beautiful, the cities are incredible. We went to Cape Town, South Africa is probably the prettiest place I've ever been. Just restaurants were fantastic, everything was wonderful. It's a first world country, and yet right next to all of this first world stuff, there are these third world sections, and we went to one of those. It was called Ivory Park Township. It was outside of Johannesburg, and driving through Ivory Park Township, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was a level of poverty that I had never seen before, and we saw. It had a smell to it because the infrastructure is just not very good, and the homes were basically kind of pieces of sheet metal that had been kind of slapped up together. And, most of them didn't have windows. They just have a piece of cloth in the, to let some air flow through. But we drove through Ivory Park Township to go to a Methodist church. And this Methodist church is doing incredible work in that township. They have a preschool, and children from the township come and are cared for. They are given a meal, which in some cases could be one of their only meals that day. And so when we got there, there was a group of leaders from the church that were meeting inside the church building, and they invited us in. They were expecting us. There were 15 pastors plus 3 spouses of pastors in our group. We're all Methodist pastors, and so they invited us in, and they started out by singing to us. They sang at the top of their lungs. I mean, they were singing so loud that you almost, it was on the verge of needing earplugs. It was so, so loud, and in harmony, incredible, rich harmony, and no accompaniment at all. It was just a cappella and just, beautiful singing. I think it was in Swahili. I'm not sure exactly what the language was. There are 11 languages spoken in South Africa, so I'm not sure which language it was, but we couldn't understand what they were saying, but we knew it was praise music just because of the spirit of it. And so they're singing this to us. It was beautiful and wonderful, and we just felt so blessed. And then afterward, they had us link hands, and they asked one of us to pray for them. And so one of the people in our group prayed for them, and then they said, "We want to pray for you." And this guy prayed this incredible prayer. He kind of preached a little sermon before it, and then he prayed this prayer in English for us. And then after that, they said, "We would like to offer you some food." And so they brought out plate after plate after plate of food, and they set up this big buffet. And there were mystery meats in there, I'm pretty sure, but we ate the food because, we wanted to be good guests. And so we ate the food and enjoyed talking with each other, and it was such a great experience. Well, we got on the bus afterward to go back to our hotel, which was a very nice hotel, and we're leaving the township, and our host got on the microphone in the bus, and he said, "I wanted you guys to understand that they are people who may only get 1 or 2 meals a day, and so it was a huge sacrifice for them to lay out that food for you. They gave up a lot to be able to feed you." And it was so humbling to hear that. But the incredible thing about it was being around those people who had so little and yet were so generous. We experienced Makarios. We experienced true happiness. I mean, it's amazing. And somehow that sermon, "Blessed are the poor," just came alive for me because they were so blessed. They were so Makarios. They had so much joy. They were not chasing after the things that you and I chase after. They found it so important to bless a group of pastors from America that they were willing to give. And I believe that they were laying up treasures in heaven when they did that. You and I can have Makarios. It is entirely possible for us to experience Makarios. It is so much better than that loop. We can build up treasures in heaven instead of on earth and have true happiness. Amen.